U.S. government issued a statement stating that Iran-backed militias launched 40 attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq, Syria. Before we dive in details, please subscribe to the channel and stay always one step ahead to know all global important events happening around you. Give a thumbs up and share the video with your family and friends. Let's move on with the video. A defective drone in Iraq may have helped keep America from being dragged deeper into a widening Middle East conflict. The drone, which was launched at the Erbil Air Base by an Iranian-backed militia before sunrise on October 26th, penetrated U.S. air defenses and crashed into the second floor of the barracks, housing American troops at about 5 a.m., according to two U.S. officials familiar with the matter. But the device laden with explosives failed to detonate, and in the end only one service member suffered a concussion from the impact, said the officials, who asked to remain anonymous to speak freely about the attack. The U.S. had got lucky, they added, as the drone could have caused carnage had it exploded. The incident was among at least 40 separate drone and rocket attacks that have been launched at U.S. forces by Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria over the past 3 weeks in response to American support for Israel in the Gaza war, according to Pentagon data and the two U.S. officials. The bombardment has only caused a few dozen minor injuries so far, with many of the rockets and one-way attack drones intercepted by U.S. air defenses in Iraq and Syria, where a total of 3,400 American troops are based. David Schenker, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy think tank, cautioned that while neither Iran and its allied groups nor the U.S. appeared to want a direct confrontation, the risks were growing. The possibility of a major strike that draws America into a conflict is a very realistic concern, he said. I think they are calibrating the attacks to harass rather than kill en masse U.S. troops, he said of Iraqi and Syrian militias. But there's a lot more they can do. It's unclear how President Joe Biden would respond to a major attack that kills a large number of Americans. Struggling in opinion polls ahead of next year's presidential election, Biden has so far sought to limit the U.S. role in the conflict mostly to ensuring military aid to Israel. The war broke out when gunmen from Hamas, the Iranian-funded militant group that rules the Palestinian enclave of Gaza, burst into southern Israel on October 7th, killing 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and taking more than 240 hostages. Since then, Israel has bombarded the coastal territory relentlessly, killing more than 10,000 people, many of them children. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew to Iraq, where most of the attacks on U.S. forces have taken place, to push Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani to crack down on the militias operating there and avert any escalation. Yet, Sudani has had little luck in persuading the militia groups from letting up their assault, or convincing their bankrollers in Iran to rein them in, according to 5 senior lawmakers in Sudani's governing coalition, a security advisor to the premier and a militia commander. The Prime Minister and around 10 senior members of his government met with the commanders of about a dozen militia groups in Baghdad on October 23rd to press the groups to halt their attacks on U.S. forces, said the 7 people who were either present or were briefed on the meeting. The plea largely fell on deaf ears, though with most of the commanders vowing to keep up their assault until Israeli forces ended their siege and bombardment of the Gaza Strip, they added. No one, not the Prime Minister or anyone else, can stand against our religious duty, said Ali Turki, a Shiite lawmaker in the governing coalition as well as a commander with the powerful Iranian-backed Asaib al-Haq militia. Arif al-Hamami, another Shiite lawmaker, said the prospects for diplomacy looked bleak. I don't think that the Prime Minister has the power to stop the attacks, as long as Israel is committing atrocities in Gaza with American help. The Iraqi and Iranian governments didn't immediately respond to requests for comment on the militia attacks and the risk of escalation. Iraq's Prime Minister has limited control over the militias, whose support he needed to win power a year ago and now form a powerful bloc in his governing coalition. The militant groups, which proliferated in Iraq in the wake of the US-led invasion in 2003 that toppled Saddam Hussein and his Sunni government, are trained and funded by Shiite power Iran. For Sudani, it's been a case of shuttle diplomacy. Hours after meeting Blinken on Sunday, the premier flew to Tehran to directly appeal to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and other Iranian officials for help, according to a senior Iraqi politician close to the Prime Minister who was briefed on the visit. Soudani asked the Iranian officials to pressure the militias into halting their attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq, fearing his politically and economically unstable country could ill afford an escalation that would see the Americans strike back against the militants, the politician said. The officials told him that the militias in Iraq made their own decisions, and Tehran wouldn't interfere in the situation there, the politician added. Iran has decried the retaliatory Israeli assault on Gaza as a genocide, and warned that, if it isn't halted, the U.S. will not be spared from this fire. Meanwhile, the Hezbollah movement, backed by Tehran in Lebanon, a group that sources say have acquired powerful Russian anti-ship missiles, has warned Washington that it would pay a heavy price in a regional war. Biden faces his own dilemmas as he receives a steady stream of reports about hostilities in the region. Among attacks outside Iraq and Syria in recent weeks, Iranian-aligned Houthi fighters unleashed 15 drones and 4 cruise missiles off the coast of Yemen that were shot down by U.S. Navy destroyer with a crew of hundreds of sailors, U.S. military officials say. The present crisis has erupted following years of steady U.S. withdrawal of military assets from the Middle East, including air defenses, as Washington seeks to focus on Russia's invasion in Ukraine and mounting tensions with China. That refocus accelerated after Biden's complete pullout from Afghanistan and the Taliban's takeover there 2 years ago. The response by Biden has been cautious so far. He ordered overnight strikes on 2 Iranian-linked arms storage facilities in Syria last month while they were unoccupied, but has not ordered any strikes in Iraq. On Wednesday, Biden followed up with a similar strike in Syria, and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin cautioned, "We urge against any escalation." Biden has warned Iranian-backed groups across the region, including the large Hezbollah movement in Lebanon, against expanding the conflict, but he and other officials have declined to be explicit about what they would do in response. The U.S. hopes a military show of force will dissuade any serious attack, and has deployed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, and even taken the rare step over the weekend of announcing that an Ohio-class submarine had moved to the region. Beyond sending air defenses like the Patriot system and a high-altitude system, the U.S. military is also taking additional steps to protect its tens of thousands of troops in the region, according to officials. The measures include beefing up security at U.S. military bases in the region by increasing patrols, restricting access and boosting intelligence gathering, they said. The response to the crisis from Biden, a Democrat, hasn't been strong enough for many of his critics, including Republicans in Congress. "They are laughing at us in Tehran," said Republican Senator Tom Cotton, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. "Iran will continue to target Americans until President Biden gets serious about imposing severe costs on Iran." At a hearing with Austin on October 31st, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham repeatedly asked if the deaths of U.S. service members would trigger a direct response against Iran. Austin demurred, only saying that Iran should be held accountable. "I wish you would be more clear, because if one of these soldiers is killed," Graham said, pausing for effect. For some, the recent attacks on U.S. troops stir painful memories of the massive truck bomb in Beirut that shredded a Marine barracks, killing 241 U.S. service members 40 years ago last month. The United States holds Hezbollah responsible for the suicide bombing, though the group has denied involvement. Every rocket launched, every bomb dropped, every bullet fired, they all painted a picture of escalating violence, of a situation spiraling out of control. U.S. troops, trained to be the best, found themselves under relentless assault, their resolve tested in the crucible of conflict. David Medeiros was a 22-year-old Marine when the concussive wave hit him from the explosion in 1983. As he recalls digging through the rubble where some of his friends were buried, he sees modern-day parallels that make him uneasy. "We had rocket attacks, mortar attacks before we got hit with the big bomb," he said. Does history repeat itself? The invasion of Gaza by Israel marked a significant escalation of the conflict. Gaza, a densely populated strip of land bordering Egypt and Israel, became the center of an intensified clash. Israel's move was a response to a surprise attack by Hamas, which resulted in a tragic loss of life and a hostage crisis. As a result, Israel declared a state of war and imposed a complete siege on Gaza. Now the impact of this invasion was not confined to the borders of Gaza. It echoed throughout the Middle East, stoking tensions and threatening to ignite a regional war. The invasion triggered a response from various groups backed by Iran, demonstrating the far-reaching influence of these militias. One of the most significant outcomes of this invasion was the activation of Iran-backed cells throughout the region. These groups, previously lying low, sprang into action, escalating the conflict beyond the borders of Gaza and Israel. In the north, we saw Hezbollah launching rockets and shells against Israeli positions. This was a clear signal of the potential for Iran to react if it perceived a threat to its proxy in Gaza. Simultaneously, the U.S. deployed the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Mediterranean, a move seen as a message to Iran and other regional actors. This action spoke volumes about the international community's concern over the escalating conflict and its potential to spill over into a full-blown regional war. In the midst of this turmoil, the devastating human cost cannot be ignored. Retaliations led to a surge in casualties, and the bombing of crossings crippled the delivery of essential supplies like food, medicine, and fuel from Egypt into Gaza. The Gaza invasion underscores the growing threat posed by Iran-backed militias. It's a stark reminder of the volatile dynamics of the Middle East, where a localized conflict can quickly escalate and ripple across the region. This event underscored the growing threat posed by these militias and the urgent need for a solution. In less than 3 years, the world has witnessed an alarming escalation of threats to global security. We've walked through the various stages of this escalation, starting with the Biden strike, which marked a significant shift in the U.S.'s approach to Iran-backed militias. This was followed by the Gaza invasion, a move that brought the potential for a regional war into sharper focus. We've seen the relentless wave of attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria, a staggering 40 in total, each one orchestrated by the same Iran-backed militias. These acts of aggression are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger, more sinister strategy that Iran has employed, using these militias as proxies to attack Western interests in the region. The world watches as the situation continues to evolve, with new threats emerging and old ones resurfacing. These challenges underscore the complexity of the current global security landscape and the need for an international response. As we continue to navigate these troubled waters, one thing is clear: the need for a comprehensive global response to these threats has never been greater.